Please subscribe and share for more story. The call that cracked the foundation of Eleanor Ashcroft's life came while she hovered between sky and ground. She sat strapped into the back of a helicopter, looking down at Port Haven, the coastal city she had helped shape for over 3 decades. From above, the skyline felt personal, steel and glass towers rising like signatures written in the air. The Ashcroft Studio emblem, a clean geometric mark inspired by load-bearing arches, was stamped onto more buildings than she could count. She spotted Harbor Crown Tower, its sharp spire cutting through the morning fog, a project investors once called impossible. Then there was Tideway Commons, with its stepped green terraces spilling down the structure like a living cliff. Each building carried memories of sleepless nights, bruising negotiations, and stubborn belief. Eleanor believed architecture should never lie. A building's beauty had to come from truth, honest materials, visible strength, and a core that could not be faked. A flawless exterior meant nothing if the foundation was weak. As the helicopter circled, the rotors thudding steadily, she felt grounded by that belief, until her headset crackled. "Ma'am," her assistant said, voice calm but tight, "there's a Ms. Renee Caldwell on the line. She's calling from Ivory Row Events. She says it concerns the Hale Marrow wedding and that it's urgent." Eleanor's chest tightened. Ivory Row was elite, expensive, discreet, ruthless about image. They were orchestrating her son Lucas Ashcroft's wedding into one of Port Haven's oldest, wealthiest families. For them to bypass protocols and call her directly meant something had gone wrong. She lifted her hand and gestured for the pilot to keep circling. The city rotated slowly beneath her, like a massive blueprint waiting to be judged. "Put her through," Eleanor said. A cool, carefully measured voice filled her ears. "Mrs. Ashcroft, thank you for taking my call. I was instructed to speak with you personally to avoid any misunderstandings." Eleanor said nothing. "As you know," the woman continued, "this wedding is being curated to reflect a very specific vision, heritage, refinement, and forward momentum." There was a pause, deliberate and heavy. "Because of that," Miss Caldwell said, "some elements have been reassessed. The families feel it's important that the day remains streamlined, focused on the future rather than complicated history." Eleanor inhaled slowly. "I'm not sure I understand," she said. "The event is meant to symbolize a new foundation," the woman replied smoothly. "Not older structures that might feel out of place." Older structures. Eleanor knew that language. It was the language of demolition. She wasn't being spoken to as a mother or even a person, but as an outdated design element. Ms. Caldwell softened her tone. "Lucas felt it would be kinder if this came from us. He didn't want you to experience any public discomfort." Eleanor's fingers curled against the armrest. "And what exactly is he asking?" she said. The answer came clean and sharp. "Your contribution is appreciated, but your presence has been deemed unnecessary. He sends his love." Unnecessary. The word landed with brutal precision. Eleanor felt the air thin around her as if the cabin had lost pressure. Her son hadn't just uninvited her, he had erased her. She stared down at Harbor Crown Tower, sunlight flashing against its glass skin. From this height, she could see the logic of its structure, the massive supports buried deep beneath the streets. She had stood on site during the foundation pour, rain soaking through her boots, because she knew strength started where no one bothered to look. "I understand," Eleanor said quietly. "Thank you for being so gracious," Miss Caldwell replied. Eleanor ended the call, without another word. The city kept turning beneath her, unaware that something essential had just fractured. Lucas had grown drunk on the view from the top. He had forgotten the concrete, the steel, and the woman who made sure the ground beneath him never gave way. The word unnecessary echoed long after the call ended. Eleanor Ashcroft stared through the helicopter's glass as Harbor Crown Tower glinted beneath the sun. From this height, she could trace its hidden strength, the deep pylons drilled into bedrock, the steel lattice no one admired, but everyone relied on. She had supervised that foundation herself, standing ankle-deep in mud while contractors complained. If the base fails, she had told them, Everything above it is a lie. Now her own son had treated her the same way developers treated inconvenient soil, something to build over and forget. The helicopter hummed steadily, indifferent. Eleanor removed her headset and closed her eyes for one long breath. Lucas hadn't just removed her from a guest list. He had declared her obsolete. The request for money had come 3 weeks earlier, on a storm-soaked Wednesday night. Lucas had called sounding breathless, rehearsed urgency trembling beneath charm. "Mom, I need your help," he had said. "With what?" Eleanor asked, already reaching for a pen. "A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," he replied quickly. "A waterfront parcel just opened up. The last one. I want to build something that honors everything you taught me." She had smiled then. "It's called the Ashcroft Green Spire," he continued. "Carbon negative. Biophilic design. Geothermal anchors. It's not about profit, it's about legacy." Legacy. He sent her a sleek digital proposal filled with lush renderings, glass wrapped in living green, sunlight spilling perfectly across terraces. "We have 48 hours, he pressed. "If we miss it, the Marrow family will think we're all talk." Eleanor hesitated. The timeline felt wrong. The light angles were off. But then Lucas said softly, "I want to build something real. Like you." And her doubt collapsed. The transfer was $410,000, wired without ceremony. The funds came from a private endowment Eleanor had set aside years earlier, the Thomas Ashcroft Memorial Fund, named for her late husband. It was meant to support young architects from overlooked communities. When the confirmation email arrived, stark and final, Eleanor felt a flicker of unease she pushed aside. "He's finally listening," she told herself. She remembered years of sacrifice, raising Lucas alone after Thomas died when she was 36, running her firm out of a converted boathouse, sleeping beneath drafting tables, while Lucas did homework nearby. She remembered pawning her engagement bracelet to cover payroll. "It's being resized," she had told her son lightly. Every choice had been mortar in the wall she built around his future. So she ignored the instinct screaming beneath her ribs. A mother's hope is louder than an architect's caution. After the helicopter call, silence settled over Eleanor's life like dust. She walked through her waterfront home, clean lines, pale wood, open light, yet it felt hollow. The wide windows overlooking the bay no longer inspired peace. They felt like witnesses. It was during this quiet unraveling that Mara Linwood appeared at her door. "I'm sorry to intrude," the young woman said, clutching a tube of rolled papers. "I'm a graduate student at Port Haven University. I study early community-focused architecture. Your work changed my life." Eleanor blinked. "You found the Riverside Unity Hall, didn't you?" she asked. Mara's face lit up. "Yes. It's perfect. Honest. Human." They spent hours talking. Mara spoke with reverence about spaces that served people instead of impressing donors. "You built dignity into concrete," she said. Eleanor felt something shift. When Mara left, Eleanor didn't sleep. The next morning she made calls. First to the city planning office. "There's no record of an Ashcroft Green Spire," the clerk said. Then to the geological firm Lucas had named. "No survey commissioned," they confirmed. "The land parcel? A protected shoreline reserve. Untouchable." Her hands trembled as she traced the wire transfer. The money hadn't gone to any development firm. It had gone straight to Ivory Row events. Memo line, venue styling and floral allocation. Eleanor sat back slowly. He hadn't borrowed the money. He had stolen it. Lucas called that evening, fury spilling through the speaker. "The venue is frozen," he snapped. "What did you do?" "I secured my assets," Eleanor replied calmly. "My assets," he shouted. "This is my wedding. You're just jealous. You can't stand being replaced." "Replaced. You're old-fashioned," he continued. "Your obsession with integrity is outdated. This is about image." Eleanor listened until his voice cracked under its own weight. Then she said quietly, "The Ashcroft name belongs to me. And you are no longer permitted to use it." She ended the call. In the silence that followed, the blueprint of her future began to change. Eleanor did not act out of anger. She acted with precision. She canceled contracts tied to her properties, withdrew permissions, invoked clauses buried deep in agreements Lucas had never read. When Ivory Row events called in panic, Eleanor answered with steady calm. "You built this wedding on borrowed ground," she said. "The foundation has withdrawn." That night, she unlocked an old cabinet and removed Lucas's inheritance documents, a controlling stake scheduled for transfer at 31. She fed them into the shredder slowly, page by page. The sound was soft, final. A structure built on lies cannot stand. She simply let gravity do its work. The backlash arrived within 48 hours. Eleanor Ashcroft's phone rang constantly, society coordinators, donors, distant relatives who had never called before. "You've embarrassed the Marrow family," one woman hissed. "This will follow you," another warned. Eleanor listened politely, then ended each call the same way. "The matter is closed." What none of them understood was that Eleanor had spent her life dealing with pressure far heavier than social outrage. Concrete cured under stress. Steel strengthened under heat. Public opinion was just noise. That afternoon, she received an email from Lucas's future father-in-law requesting a civil discussion. Eleanor agreed to meet, on her terms. They gathered in the boardroom at the top of Harbor Crown Tower. Lucas sat rigid beside Isabel Marrow, her jaw tight, her parents flanking them like polished sentinels. "You've damaged our reputation," Mr. Marrow said coldly. Eleanor folded her hands. "Your reputation was never my responsibility." Lucas slammed his palm on the table. "You ruined my life." "No," Eleanor replied evenly. "I stopped financing a lie." She stood and gestured toward the window. "Every building you see stands because its foundation was respected. You committed fraud using my name and my money." Silence followed. "The funds will be repaid," Eleanor added. "Every cent. To the memorial fund you stole from." Lucas stared at her, stunned, as if seeing her clearly for the first time, and not liking what he saw. When the meeting ended, Eleanor felt no triumph, only release. She returned home lighter, as though a weight she had carried for decades had finally been set down. That evening, Mara Linwood stopped by again, hesitant. "I heard what happened," she said softly. Eleanor smiled faintly. "Then you know I've lost a son." Mara shook her head. "No. You chose truth." They talked late into the night about buildings that healed rather than impressed, about spaces that welcomed people who felt invisible. Eleanor recognized something rare in Mara, not ambition, but purpose. "You see structure the way I do," Eleanor said. Mara nodded. "Because I needed it once." Within weeks, Eleanor announced a new venture. Not a tower, not a landmark. A nonprofit design initiative called Groundwork Studio. She endowed it with $12 million, redirecting resources once meant for prestige into service. Their mission was simple: build honest spaces for forgotten communities. Shelters, libraries, women's centers, schools. Mara joined as a junior partner, not an heir, but a collaborator. "This isn't charity," Eleanor told her. "It's responsibility." Their first project would rebuild Riverside Unity Hall, the modest community center Eleanor had designed decades earlier, now crumbling from neglect. "It deserves another life," Mara said. "So do we," Eleanor replied. They stood together at the construction site months later, boots dusty, wind sharp with promise. Rebar crossed the fresh foundation like a skeleton of strength. "The load-bearing walls go here," Mara said, tracing lines on the plans spread across the hood of Eleanor's car. "The core is solid." Eleanor placed her hand over Mara's. "Yes," she said quietly. "It will hold." She felt no longing for the son who had mistaken image for substance. She had lost a name-bearer, but gained a legacy carrier. Some structures are meant to rise high. Others are meant to endure. News of Groundwork Studio spread quietly at first. Eleanor preferred it that way. No press release. No gala. Just phone calls to people who understood substance over spectacle. "You're serious about this?" one former client asked. "I've never been more serious," Eleanor replied. What surprised her most was how quickly the right people responded. Engineers who volunteered time, suppliers who discounted materials, city officials who expedited permits without being asked. Integrity, she realized, still spoke a language people respected. It simply didn't shout. Lucas tried to call again. Eleanor did not answer. Instead, his lawyer sent a letter demanding reinstatement of privileges and access to family-associated assets. Eleanor read it once, then handed it to her own counsel. No response, she said. Some doors, once closed, were load-bearing. Reopening them would compromise everything she was building now. Silence, in this case, was structural. The repayment came 6 months later. Lucas and the Marrows sold what they could. Art, vehicles, even Isabel's engagement ring. The full amount returned to the Thomas Ashcroft Memorial Fund. Eleanor acknowledged receipt with a single line. Funds restored. Matter concluded. There was no reconciliation. No apology. And Eleanor found she did not need one. At Riverside, demolition revealed something unexpected. Beneath layers of decay, the original foundation was still intact. It's solid, the site foreman said, surprised. Eleanor smiled. It always was. They chose to preserve it, building upward with respect instead of erasure. Mara watched closely, absorbing decisions not taught in classrooms. When to reinforce, when to let history stand. During one late afternoon review, Mara hesitated. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. Eleanor knew what she meant. "No," she said after a moment. "I regret waiting so long to choose truth." Mara nodded, eyes bright. "Then this building matters more than any tower." "Yes," Eleanor agreed. "Because people will feel safe here." Invitations arrived, panels, awards, interviews. Eleanor declined most. She accepted one, a lecture at Port Haven University. A student asked, "What's the most important lesson architecture taught you?" Eleanor didn't hesitate. "That strength is invisible," she said. "And anything built for appearances alone will fail." Lucas faded from public view. His career stalled without the Ashcroft name to anchor it. Eleanor heard updates secondhand and felt nothing sharp, only distance. She had grieved him long before. Some losses happen in silence. Groundwork's second project broke ground, a women's resource center near the docks. Then a public library. Then a school. Each structure was modest. Each one mattered. Eleanor worked fewer hours, but with deeper satisfaction. Her hands still traced blueprints, but now she listened more than she spoke. On the anniversary of Thomas's death, Eleanor and Mara stood together in the completed Riverside Hall. Children laughed inside. Light spilled through high windows just as it had decades earlier. "He would have loved this," Mara said. Eleanor nodded. He believed in foundations too. She felt him there, not in memory but in purpose. Late one evening, Mara presented Eleanor with a proposal. "It's yours," Mara said nervously. Eleanor reviewed it carefully, then smiled. "This is honest work," she said. "You're ready." Mara exhaled, relieved. Eleanor did not see a replacement. She saw continuity. When Eleanor officially stepped back from daily leadership, the announcement was simple. "I'm not retiring," she clarified. "I'm reinforcing." Laughter followed, warm and genuine. She remained present, guiding, advising, ensuring the core stayed strong. One afternoon, Eleanor returned alone to Harbor Crown Tower. She stood by the glass and looked out over Port Haven. The city shimmered, alive and imperfect. She felt no ownership, only gratitude. What mattered most had never been the skyline. Thanks for watching. If you value stories of respect, dignity, and justice, please subscribe. It means more than you know, and it lets me keep sharing the lessons life has carved into me.